here that we can use.
Okay, I'm streaming now, guys. Sorry
All
about that.
right. Awesome. Okay. All right. So I'll try to get over to the slide that we're going to be coming up upon soon. I think I got it. Okay. So we are still in chapter 1. And we're slowly making our way through. We've only got a couple more pages, you guys. We may be able to do it today, potentially. Potentially. But so we're in the section where we're going over the USDA dietary goals for Americans. We've gone over the first 3 goals. So we are today starting on goal number 4. And there's a total of 6. So I think we may be able to get through and finish chapter 1 today.
Yeah, we can definitely do this.
I am highly optimistic. So, all right. So let's see, Kim, you want to start reading?
Sure. Okay. Goal number 4. 1.3.9.4, goal 4, reduce cholesterol consumption to about 300 milligrams a day. The problem. Already by 1950, Ansel Keys had established that an increased intake of dietary cholesterol does not increase blood cholesterol concentrations. Isn't it funny that we still think that today? Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
The result, since cholesterol is present only in animal produce, this advice further increased bias against consumption of animal products for those wishing to reduce their coronary heart disease risk. This advice was already dated in 1950. In that year, Keys published a study showing that the amount of cholesterol in the diet did not influence blood cholesterol concentrations. 2 subsequent publications from the same group over the next 15 years confirmed this conclusion. Since cholesterol is present only in animal produce, and our interpretation advanced by Harcombe could be that if the consumption of animal foods containing cholesterol does not raise the blood cholesterol concentrations, then according to Keys' twin hypotheses, eating animal produce cannot cause coronary heart disease. This point is seldom appreciated.
Like whenever is that brought up especially by the doctors?
Yeah. One effective goal 4 was to target eggs as dangerous since they contain substantial amounts of cholesterol, about 200 milligrams per egg, or 67% of the daily allowed cholesterol intake. Numerous studies have since shown that eggs are one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. They are rich sources of high-quality protein, iron, phosphorus, riboflavin, and vitamin B12, especially. Pantothenic acid, biotin, choline, vitamin D, especially, and vitamin E. Eating up to 14 eggs per week does not increase blood cholesterol concentrations. One case report of a healthy 88-year-old male who eats 25 eggs a day showed normal blood cholesterol concentration. Egg consumption is also not linked to coronary heart disease risk in the long term. In fact, eating more than 1 egg per day may have a protective effect. It took some time, but the 2015 U.S. Dietary Guidelines reversed the McGovern Committee's advice and reported that dietary cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern. Similarly, a series of articles in the Annals of Internal Medicine in 2020 concluded that the overall association of meat consumption, another major source of dietary cholesterol, with adverse outcomes is marginal. The quality of the studies suggests little or no effect.
But they didn't look. They should have had a press release and announced that little change. Yeah. But they didn't. They just buried it in there somewhere. And I mean, you're only going to find it if you look for it. And like if you just go through and read it.
Right. We know that nutritional studies in general are poor. they're not good studies. So, I mean, it's
Exactly.
not just, yeah, it's not just the studies that are in, in favor of a vegetable-based diet or plant-based diet, but it's also the studies that show, results like these. They're probably not good studies anyways. But still, when those other studies have their conclusions, it's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you it goes into like all the marketing and the new food items based on this new information that is on an unreliable source. But if they start to point us back in the direction of whole natural foods, then that's going to hurt their food production of the processed foods. So there's kind of an incentive, there's a bias against wanting to, announce this sort of thing. Because so many people, I mean, you can have your own chickens. You don't need to go and get your eggs, or you can buy them from your, someone else who has chickens, and it's just not good for the big food industry.
Yeah.
So,
but it's amazing.
Yeah. 25 eggs a day. That's a lot. What astounds me about that is like, I can't eat that many eggs just because I start to lose my taste for them.
Yeah.
I love eggs, but at some point you're like, okay, enough eggs already.
It's funny because like sometimes I'll eat like 5 or 6 eggs a day for a while.
Yeah.
And then I won't have any eggs for about a week. It's like I just kind of don't want any, so I won't eat them. And then I'll just go back to eating eggs again. And usually I have anywhere between 3 and 6 eggs a day. That's usually how many I have, just depending. Yeah. But it's funny how it just cycles.
Yeah.
I'm not huge on eggs, but if I eat eggs, I have a firm 3 egg limit. Any more than that, and I almost get just like nauseated.
How do you eat yours? Like I eat mine sunny side up. And so I just I have a bowl that I put them in, and then I just kind of mix it all up, so it's got the.
Yeah, I definitely don't eat them that way. I would get nauseated. My way I usually eat them is scrambled, but unless I take them to work, sometimes if I take them to work, I'll take hard boiled, and I don't really enjoy the egg without anything on it that much. So sometimes I'll just sit there and make deviled eggs out of it at my charge desk. I'll be chopping up. I'll put a little pickle in it, and I'll put some mustard in it, and a little bit of mayo, and so it's good.
I like all kinds of eggs, but I'm also a pretty lazy cook, and so I tend to do scrambled.
Yeah,
but scramble is easy, but I use a lot of butter, and so it really tastes good. It's just butter and salt. But I know a lot of people will add milk to their scrambled eggs, but I just add water, and it fluffs it up. It just fluffs it up and makes them really fluffy, and
people have always told me that adding milk or water fluffed it up, so I'd always done that, right? But now that I don't do that, like I don't notice a difference really. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not that cultured of a chef.
I don't.
But I used
to always add milk.
Super obvious. Yeah, I don't think it's super obvious, super obvious. It's kind of a little more subtle, but I do notice a little bit of a difference. It's a little fluffier, but of course you gotta beat them too.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm not doing, because I'll just add it right in the in the pan, or I used to.
Yeah, no, I think you need to add them, and like I make mine in a little measure, like a little Pyrex measuring cup, and I beat them in there, and I add the water, and I beat them up real good, and I add my salt, and while my butter's melting in the pan, and but I use a lot of butter, so that's good. All right, okay. Well, let's see. So the next section, I can do the next section is goal 5. And that is reduce sugar consumption by about 40% to account for about 15% of total energy. So the problem is First, sugar is one of the most addictive products known to humans. Second, the fructose in sugar is metabolized to produce non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the result is obesity and diabetes epidemics. So thus goal 5 is nonsensical in 2 reasons. So first, sugar is one of the most addictive, socially acceptable drugs available. And like all addictive products, most people cannot eat it in moderation. Second, the fructose in sugar is metabolized differently from glucose and is specifically converted to triglyceride or fat in the liver. This produces non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and all the complications, including atherogenic dyslipidemia and increased whole body insulin resistance. So, since fructose produces a different hormonal response from that of glucose, one hypothesis is that it stimulates food intake, increasing the probability of calorie overassumption and weight gain. Thus, overconsumption of fructose, especially in sugar or high fructose corn syrup sweetened beverages, may be the key driver of the global obesity pandemic. This is not a novel concept. So, Chapter 1.2 introduced the work of Cleve and Campbell in reviewing what they described as the saccharine diseases. So, Cleve in particular promoted the idea that sugar and refined carbohydrates are the real drivers of type 2 diabetes, and that in turn, type 2 diabetes is the root cause of coronary heart disease. This would be in line with Albrecht's and Kuo's foundational studies linking carbohydrate-induced hypertriglyceridemia with increased coronary heart disease. Thus, Cleve wrote, for an unnaturally high blood sugar constantly impinging on the endothelial lining of the arteries over many years might cause degenerative changes in this endothelium and by diffusion in the arterial wall too, especially at the sites of greatest strain. This degeneration could then initiate the thrombosis, which is a blood clot. Of one thing, the author is very confident the key to causation of coronary thrombosis lies in the causation of diabetes and also obesity. I actually learned that in nursing school. Do you remember, Kim, whether or not you learned that in nursing school?
I think so. It's sounding vaguely familiar.
It was, I remember it being explained in a different way. Hey, Mike, good to see you here. Listen while you work. Awesome. It was explained different to me though, because I seem to recall it was explained like sugar. That didn't say that it caused inflammation of the arteries, but it said that it did damage. And it was more like described like it was the sugar crystals causing microabrasions on the arterial wall. And then that was what caused the inflammation kind of, and it wasn't, yeah. So I don't know, maybe that's what they're talking about here. Is the damage to the endothelial wall, these little tiny, just from the exposure to the sugar, causing these, little injuries, like micro injuries that cause an inflammatory reaction that then leads to all the problems, Yeah. So interesting. Okay. So that Cleve as in the person is most likely correct is confirmed by the recent finding in the Women's Health Study. The Women's Health Study was initially designed as a clinical trial to evaluate the effects of vitamin E or low-dose aspirin on the risk of developing coronary heart disease or cancer in initially healthy women free from cardiovascular disease and cancer at baseline. Those studies found no overall benefit from either intervention, but a subsequent 21.4-year-long prospective follow-up cohort study of 84,024 of these women evaluated the predictive value of more than 50 clinical lipid, inflammatory, and metabolic risk factors and biomarkers for the subsequent development of coronary heart disease. So figure 115 shows the key findings of the study. So I've got that right here. Okay, so it looks like the top part in red is the risk factors, and the bottom part are the biochemical markers. Okay, I'll keep reading and you guys can look at that and make sure that we're understanding it. Okay, what's LPIR? That's the lipoprotein insulin resistance. That's the first bar of the blue bar, right? Mm-hmm. That score is based on lipoprotein subclass and size information measured with nuclear magnetic resonance or NMR imaging. It has a strong association with multiple markers of insulin resistance and may represent a simple means to identify individuals with insulin resistance. The score is based on studies showing changes in lipoproteins in persons with insulin resistance. In particular, those with insulin resistance show the following characteristic NMR lipoprotein patterns. And then there's a bulleted list. So the first is the greater number of the large subclass of very low density lipoprotein particles, greater number of the small subclass of low density lipoprotein particles, a lower number of the large subclass of high density lipoprotein particles. In addition, very low density lipoprotein particle sizes are generally larger, and mean LDL and HDL particle size is usually smaller in persons with insulin resistance or prediabetes. And in contrast, serum LDL cholesterol concentration, the principal target of the low-fat, heart-healthy intervention diets in trials like is that Women's Health Study? There's a big old long R acronym here. Do you guys remember what that is? It's WHIRCDMT. Was of little predictive value. Accordingly, a low-fat diet, which may indeed lower blood LDL cholesterol concentrations, but at the cost of increasing atherogenic dyslipidemia, especially in those with insulin resistance, would be expected to worsen coronary heart disease outcomes, precisely as happened in the subgroup of postmenopausal women with prior coronary heart disease in the study. So are you guys understanding what they're trying to say with this chart? You're usually good at this, Carrie.
Honestly, no. I don't know if I'm just brain dead or what, but I mean, logically, the way I'm interpreting it is that if you go down, the risk factor, the number one risk factor for coronary heart disease would be type 2 diabetes. That's what I'm guessing. And then it would be metabolic syndrome, which does tie into that. Then after that would be hypertension and obesity, which all of those actually are part of metabolic syndrome.
Yeah.
And then smoking, which of course isn't, and then last but not least would be a family history of the premature coronary heart disease. Now down at the bottom, I'm interpreting this to mean that the hazard ratios are going down with each item. So the lipoprotein insulin resistance is the number one indicator, by looking at those labs. And then following, of course, is triglycerides, which is kind of surprising because I would almost think that it would be triglycerides, but so I'm not, but anyway, then it goes down to the various breakdowns of the lipids and inflammatory biomarkers. I presume that means stuff like CRP and maybe cortisol or something like that. Inflammatory biomarkers.
So I guess it's showing that there's a higher correlation between the lipoprotein, which is, I guess, because it's insulin resistance, it fits with this particular goal about the sugar, because that's something
But
that
lipoprotein insulin resistance, what exactly do they mean by that?
Good question. They probably just explained it and it went right over my head.
It went over mine for sure, because
all right, this may be one to look up.
Yeah.
So
because I'm not seeing it I'm looking in the in the recent text, and I'm not seeing something that identifies what exactly that means.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna look at it.
Would that be related to like triglycerides causing insulin resistance?
I would kind of think that, but then they've got triglycerides listed as something separate, unless they're separating out the triglycerides by themselves. Like if somebody isn't quite insulin resistant yet, maybe.
Okay, so this is the lipoprotein insulin resistance score. Is a blood test that measures insulin resistance and predicts the risk of developing type 2 diabetes and heart disease. The score is calculated using mentions the NMR to measure the size and concentration of 6 lipoprotein particles, which was what they discussed. So
I guess like LDL and HDL.
Yeah,
too, right?
the VLDL, LDL.
Just maybe in general across the board,
Yeah, I kind of get that.
Oh, maybe those bullet points are identifying what that is. The bullet points on the previous page, on page 54 toward the bottom.
It shows, because it examines these different things, and it shows, it kind of basically takes all of the concentrations of all of these particles and puts them into one score.
Okay, so that's what that is. All right, I got it now.
Yeah, so I don't know the actual calculation. It doesn't say here, but it says that you can lower your score by maintaining a healthy weight through regular physical activity. And it says a balanced diet, but of course we don't do that. We have a very unbalanced diet. Reducing sedentary behavior and managing stress. So yeah, and of course, I'm assuming that those of us who eat carnivore, we're probably going to have a better score. I mean, just from the last, like the fractionated LDLs that I got, I mean, my levels are good. I've got a smaller amount of the high density particles and more of the fluffy particles. And yeah. So, okay. All righty. Carrie, you want to wrap up the chapter?
Yes, let's bring this home. Okay, 1.3.9.6, goal 6, reduce salt consumption by 50 to 85% to about 3 grams per day. Oh boy, the problem, there was never any scientific evidence supporting this advice. Well, yeah, I'd say that's a problem. Oh my God.
Gee.
Pretty big problem there. I mean, it's an inconvenience, really,
Yeah.
Well, didn't you mention before, Kim, that I think it was you that said that the problem with salt is probably what you're putting it on?
I mean, yeah, I think so. Yeah, although I think I didn't mention that. Usually it's a bunch of carbohydrates that you're needing. Well, you need a lot of salt for it, but I don't think it's the salt that's harming you. I think it's all the sugar, from the carbohydrates.
Yeah. So the result, low salt intakes are associated with the increased production of the hormone aldosterone, which raises blood pressure and is associated with higher death rates.
Yeah, because I remember now, Lynn, because if you eat all those carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to be elevated, right? Because we know that when we eliminate almost all, if not all, carbohydrates, our insulin goes down, and with that goes all the water, right? Not all the water, but a lot of water.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that makes your blood pressure much lower naturally and without effort on your part,
Mhm.
other than eating
Yeah.
the good, tasty food,
Yep.
Yeah, but I didn't know that. I mean, I wonder what they mean here by low salt intake, increasing the production of the aldosterone. Like how low? Because, I mean, that would be like obviously like clinically low
Yeah.
levels.
Mhm.
Which I remember, like when I was working with the cirrhosis patients, and well, really with whoever was taking care of them, because once they got advanced, they were usually really unable to take care of themselves. But um, I can't tell you how many times the doctor would put them on, tell them not to have this added sodium, and they would misinterpret that as no sodium
Yeah.
and not realize
The
that, no,
heart
wait,
patients do that a lot too.
yeah, like you can't cut
Mhm.
out, and probably kidney patients that are on sodium restriction, like you cannot cut out all the sodium out of your
Mhm.
diet and live for long. I mean, it'll go down, and then you're going to end up with clinical symptoms, and it's yeah, dangerous. But yeah, interesting. And of course, with us doing the carnivore diet, I mean, I got to make sure I'm getting enough sodium, because without
Mhm.
packaged foods,
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know, yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I know. So the advice has also prevented identification of the real causes of elevated blood pressure, which are insulin resistance, sugar, and high carbohydrate diets.
That's
There
what
we go.
you're saying.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
This is another piece of advice that sounds reasonable but turns out to be hopelessly wrong. As we reviewed in detail in Real Food on Trial, there is evidence that those with established hypertension may benefit from sodium restriction to less than 5 grams per day, but in those who are healthy, lower intakes are associated with increased risk for cardiovascular events and death.
Well, and it's interesting because the cardiologists, the doctors will put them under 2 grams a day.
Woo!
Two
Yeah.
2 gram sodium diet.
That's
Yeah.
horrible.
Oh yeah, and people are miserable doing that.
Yeah,
It's
for
like,
one thing, their food tastes like crap, but for another, I mean, your body needs it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what would happen if those same specialists would tell them to cut the carbs.
Right.
It's wild to me how widely accepted this is in the medical field to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I was just casually conversing with one of our anesthesia providers the other day, and she is an attending physician, okay? And she was drinking chicken broth. And she was joking around about how she didn't have time to eat and she drank chicken broth. And I said, "Oh, I love chicken broth." I said, "I drink the one from here sometimes, but I'll add about 6 packs of salt to it." And she just looked at me like, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "If I don't have that, I'll get some sardines or something." And she's like, "Your sodium, how's your blood pressure? Is your blood pressure elevated?" I said, "Oh, my blood pressure is great. Like, 110/65. I mean, my blood pressure is fantastic." And she was like, "How does your blood pressure don't you know that'll hurt your blood pressure?" And I said, "No, it really doesn't." I said, "Because I'm on a low carb diet. So whenever I get rid of those carbs, I have a loss of a lot of water too. And so, that keeps my blood pressure pretty low." And she just looked at me so puzzled. And,
Mm-hmm.
it was very bizarre to her that, like, it was almost like something that she could not conceive of. And so that is so disturbing to me because, obviously it's something that we all know. Even, just a regular, Joe Schmo off the street knows that if you are not eating carbs, you're going to lose a lot of water and your blood pressure is going to come down. I mean, if you've ever done it, you know that. So what happened to Lynn?
I don't know. I don't know.
Lynn, come back.
No. She
Anyway,
went into the dark
we can
vortex.
keep talking until she comes
Yeah.
back from the void. But
Yeah,
isn't
it's
that wild?
it is wild, but you know, in lies my doctor told me, Dr. Barry, oh,
Sorry,
hello.
guys.
Lynn?
My computer died.
Oh
Oh,
my gosh.
So I'm on my cell phone now. I'm gonna.
Hey,
oh,
plan B,
I
right?
didn't
yep.
realize that it wasn't fully plugged in. So
Oh, yeah.
all right. So sorry, I missed. I missed all that.
Oh, no worries. I was just talking about how the anesthesia provider, she's an attending physician. She was drinking some chicken broth, and she didn't add any salt to it. But I told her, I said, I love chicken broth, but I have to add about 6 packs of salt to it because it's no sodium. And she just looked at me like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then I was talking about how I love to eat sardines too. And she's like, but they're so high in sodium, you know. And she said, how's your blood pressure? And I told her, I said, you know, I eat a low carb diet. So when my insulin goes down, all of my, all that excess water and inflammation goes out of my body. So my blood pressure is like 110/65. And she just looked at me like she could not conceive of that. And she's a really intelligent doctor. So like, if she
Yeah.
doesn't know about that, like,
They're not told.
your average low carb person knows all about this. I mean,
Right.
if you've
Right.
done the low carb
Right.
diet, you
Yeah.
pretty
They're not
much know
told.
about this.
And they're not taught anything about that, which is interesting because doctors, I often hear doctors refer to themselves as scientists. I mean, they've
Yeah.
studied the sciences like
I consider them
crazy.
scientists.
I consider them scientists too. And so it's just interesting. They obviously just don't have time to dig into the nutrition component of health. They just go with what they're taught because they're inundated with learning everything else about the body. Because
Yeah.
I would imagine that if they actually were had these studies put in front of them and could see how poorly done they were, that the
Yeah.
science part of their brain would kick in, just like with us, and
Yeah.
go, wait a minute.
Well, and doctors doctors are often victims of medical myths, just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
You hear something repeated often enough, you just think it's the truth.
Yes.
And doctors don't often have time to sit around and read studies, unfortunately.
Right.
They are
Right.
just spread so thin. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a product of our current system. And that's why seeing my functional medicine doctor is a good thing because, yes, I have to pay out of pocket. Yes, it's expensive, but I
Mm-hmm.
know I'm going to get 30 minutes to an hour of her time or more at times. And it's going to be dedicated to me and my specific issues. And it's going to be geared towards health, health maintenance rather than just saying, here's a pill or a surgery for your symptom.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So interesting.
So the focus on salt has shifted attention from the wrong white crystal. I love their sense of humor. This is great. I'll read that again. The focus on salt has shifted attention from the wrong white crystal, sugar, in causing high blood pressure. Anyone with hypertension should avoid sugar, not salt, because insulin resistance is the major driver of most cases of high blood pressure.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and and those of us who are eating this way, we have shown, I mean, we're showing that you can eat plenty of salt and be fine.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try to get back in on my computer. So if I can, I will exit out. I may be in here twice for a moment if it'll let me.
Okay. And my thought has always been, just to talk about something while you're doing that, if you have high blood pressure, should you watch your salt? If you have high blood pressure and you're eating just a standard American crap diet, you might ought to watch your salt because maybe, I mean, that's just the mechanics of it. I believe it can increase your blood pressure more if that's your situation. But and also if you have like kidney problems and stuff like that, I'm sure there are definitely instances in which as we were taught, you should watch your salt intake. That doesn't mean no salt.
Right.
But,
Right.
you know, if we're talking about somebody on a low carb diet, even if they have those conditions, chances are, like, of course, they need to closely monitor and they need to, you know, consult with their doctor about their blood pressure, not necessarily about their diet. That's none of their doctor's business.
Right.
Fortunately. But yeah, they need to keep tabs on it and make sure that it doesn't drop too low when you go on that low
Right.
carb diet. If you're on any medications, it could very well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And you know, all the sodium that we're getting through packaged foods, you know, when you're switching to a low carb or no carb diet, you know, you got to make up for it.
Yeah.
You know, so you got to add the sodium back. But yeah, I mean, for somebody with healthy organs, you know, I don't see that there's any need to restrict sodium. In fact, it does say that the low sodium intakes are actually associated with higher death rates, and it
Mhm.
raises blood pressure to have too little sodium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the complete opposite effect.
Mhm.
So, okay. All right. Carrie, you want to just pick up the
Yep.
summary and
1.3.10 summary. It is clear that the 1977 dietary guidelines were written by an unqualified group with transparent goal of extending Senator George McGovern's ailing political career. Well, let's tell us how you really feel. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. This is the best textbook I've ever read. The guidelines were based on the false theory that the U.S. diet had changed radically from a cereal-based to a meat-based diet in the early 1900s, and that this abrupt change had caused the sudden appearance of the coronary heart disease epidemic. According to this logic, now clearly shown to be false, simply reversing this change by replacing animal-based foods with cereals and grains would reverse the coronary heart disease epidemic and at the same time prevent any future increases in rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity. The 45 years since 1977 have proved that this theory was hopelessly wrong. The proof that there was never any hard scientific evidence to support this hypothesis has now been clearly described. Indeed, this textbook provides all the evidence we will ever need, finally, to lay the 1977 U.S. dietary guidelines to rest. Huzzah!
hope so.
We need to get those guidelines a tombstone.
Yes. And there are
Play some taps.
There are pages and pages of references.
Yeah, pages.
Oh my
Look
goodness.
at that.
Wow.
Wow. So that was a tiny little paragraph at the top
Look
of page
at that, guys.
56. Yeah.
These are
And
all
the references go all the way from 56 to 69. Holy cow. There are 458.
pages and pages.
Yeah, 458 references for that chapter. So
Wow.
Wow is
Yeah.
right. So,
I mean, if
chapter
somebody
2.
wants references, they got them. I mean,
Yeah, that's for sure.
if you're inspired, dig in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know how like the vegans and everybody will say, show me the science, you know, and of course the science that they show is
I want them to show me the science.
right, and not some relative risk thing or observational study. I mean, I want to see some true science. But anyway,
I'm all about science, but I want to see, actual science instead of
yeah, exactly. True. Well, and of course, as Gary Taubes and Nina Tai Schultz and many others have pointed out, nutritional science isn't really science. It just isn't.
Right.
Especially the way it's
because
done
it
now.
can't be, it can't be. It would be inhumane if it were.
Yeah.
We would have to hold people in little boxes and
but the ones that they have done, they've done those studies, like the one what was it, in a prison, the Minnesota study, I think it was, that totally showed the opposite of what Keyes's hypotheses were, and about the fats and the seed oils, comparing the animal fats with the seed oils, and it was the study that was hidden, I think.
Yeah. And those things just get conveniently overlooked,
Mm-hmm. And that was a legitimate study because those people were actually in a closed environment. They knew what those people were eating. So, because they were actually in an institution, and it went on for several years. So it's very, very interesting. Boy, this is the best textbook I've ever read. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I've never read another textbook, I don't believe.
Well, I mean, I've studied textbooks for school.
Yeah. But you pick and choose. Like, you don't start at the beginning of a textbook and read straight through,
Right.
You just read whatever the assignment is for that day, right?
Yep.
Right.
And you definitely aren't doing it for fun.
Do you ever watch these movies where they have somebody who's enrolled at like Harvard or Princeton or Stanford or something, and you got your like snooty bookworm who supposedly not only has completely read the textbook but has read all the additional recommended reading for all the courses? I've watched some movies that have characters like that, and I'm just going, no way.
Right.
Absolutely.
Some people might be that into it, if that's like their special interest,
I bet Gary Taubes was like that in school.
But then the person still has a social life.
Oh, yeah. They definitely don't have a social life.
No. Not if you're doing all that.
Well, I mean, I guess if somebody, maybe if somebody has the ability to speed read, that's a possibility. Okay, I'm going to exit.
Oh, we got an echo.
I know. I'm trying to get in. I'm going to give up. I don't know what's going on with my computer. Did you hear that?
It's the if you have kids, all of us have kids, and I don't know about you, but like my niece and my daughter used to do this thing where like one of them would repeat what the other one said just to get on their nerves.
Oh yeah.
Do kids ever do that? Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They would pester each other. Yeah.
Hey, y'all want to move on to chapter 2 now?
I do.
Let's do it.
I want to make sure my phone is going to be able to hang out and not die on me too. So I think I've got a decent amount of batteries, but let me just, I'm going to see if I can, let's see.
Well, you want me to start reading while you're doing that?
Yeah. You want to introduce the chapter?
Yeah.
And
so, I don't know what you mean by introduce the chapter. Do you mean read?
No, just share what the chapter is, because it's a different topic.
Okay. Nutritional aspects is what it's called. Chapter 2.
That was it.
And look at the authors.
Easy peasy.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Yeah. Authors on this one are Amber O'Hearn, Eric Westman, William Yancey Jr., and Neville Wellington.
Okay, do we know any of? I mean, I've heard
Amber O'Hearn and Eric Westman. Dr. Westman is the one he's one of the first earliest adopters, or in the mainstream. That he's been doing low carb diets in his practice for like 20 years, and he actually had worked and studied under, or he learned from Atkins, through his university and stuff. Dr. Eric Westman, he's a big deal.
Yeah. We love him.
And I love him. I love him too. I would like to meet him. He's another one that I would definitely fangirl over.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Let's go.
Okay. So, is it my turn?
Yep.
Okay. 2.1 Introduction. I've got to get my glasses back on. With evidence pointing to the efficacy of therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, official protocol for implementation into clinical practice are required. During the metabolic transition from high carbohydrate to a therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, it's going to be referred to as TCR, so you guys know, diet. Clinical considerations and patient guidance are required. Aside from the formulation and prescription of TCR, clinicians must be familiar with the precautions, assessment, and monitoring of the clinical outcomes associated with this intervention. Nutritional ketosis is a physiological ketosis of the fed state with specific biochemical and nutritional aspects that must be taken into account in TCR. Understanding this metabolic state, as well as the biochemistry and physiology of ketone metabolism, is critical. When prescribing TCR, the clinician must also understand the context of nutrient requirements as well as the differences between animal and plant nutrition. This chapter discusses the most important nutritional aspects to consider and comprehend when prescribing TCR.
Okay, cool.
You want me to go ahead and continue since that was so short?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 2.2, therapeutic carbohydrate restricted dietary intervention. 2.2.1, formulating a therapeutic carbohydrate restricted diet. 2.2.1.1, definition of low carbohydrate, high fat diets and therapeutic carbohydrate restriction. Dietary patterns have been described in many ways: by historical description, hunter-gatherer and paleo; by geographical use, Mediterranean; by diet book or company name or author, such as South Beach, Weight Watchers, and Atkins; by prominent type of food source, such as vegetarian; by what nutrient is limited, such as gluten-free, low glycemic, low FODMAP; by the disease it is treating, dietary approach to stop hypertension or the DASH diet; or by the level of macronutrient composition, ultra low fat, low carbohydrate. Most diet research studies will include the distribution of 3 macronutrients, with an assumption that the essential vitamins and minerals are provided. The 3 macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat, are typically given as a percentage of the total daily energy caloric intake. Over the last 15 years, multiple independent groups have examined low carbohydrate diets in human clinical trials and given them the name of therapeutic carbohydrate restricted or carbohydrate restricted diets, TCR. TCR diets are classified into several groups based on the amount of carbohydrate consumed per day, which is typically expressed in grams of carbohydrate per day rather than percentages of caloric intake, owing to the fact that this is how the dietary pattern is taught. A low carbohydrate diet is defined as having below 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. If the dietary carbohydrate is sufficiently low to cause an increase in blood or urine ketone bodies, typically less than 50 grams of total dietary carbohydrate per day, then the diet is called a very low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet. In the medical setting, some ketogenic programs begin at 20 grams of total carbohydrates per day, while some programs begin at 30 grams of total carbohydrates per day. TCR diets fall in the macronutrient ranges of 5% to 30% carbohydrate, 20% to 40% protein, and 30% to 70% fat of daily energy intake. TCR ketogenic diets typically fall in the macronutrient ranges of 0 to 10% carbohydrate, 20 to 35% protein, 55 to 80% fat, with daily caloric intake range from 1,200 to 2,000 calories.
So it's kind of cool to get a definition here. Because there's a lot of discussion. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about technically what is a ketogenic diet, technically, what is a carnivore diet, and so it's kind of cool to get a definition here.
Yeah, it is. The term LCHF stands for low carbohydrate, high fat, and is a popular way to describe TCR or carbohydrate restricted diets, which is the term used in research papers. TCR is taught by giving a maximum limit of daily carbohydrate grams without explicitly limiting energy intake or calories. The TCR limit in carbohydrates leads to a reduction in hunger, and as a result, individuals consume approximately 500 to 1,000 fewer calories than before diet initiation without having to explicitly limit energy calories. The ketogenic threshold is the level of daily carbohydrate intake at which there is an increase in measurable ketone production in the blood, urine, and or breath. This ketogenic threshold is variable, but the percentage of individuals with an elevation in ketones increases as the amount of carbohydrates in the diet decreases. When the daily carbohydrate intake is below 20 grams per day, nearly everyone will have an elevation in ketone concentrations. This increase in measurable ketones is called nutritional ketosis. So there is TCR with nutritional ketosis and TCR without nutritional ketosis. When reading nutritional research studies, TCR with nutritional ketosis is most similar to a LCHF ketogenic diet. TCR without nutritional ketosis is comparable to a low carbohydrate, low glycemic, or Mediterranean dietary pattern. While most research studies of carbohydrate restricted diets have used total carbohydrate in grams in their teaching, TCR is commonly taught using net glycemic carbohydrate in grams as the method of counting carbohydrates.
Yeah, when you guys were on, I mean, Kim, you were on a ketogenic. Were you guys both on ketogenic diets before? I think you were, right?
I was, but
Did
I
you
did not track anything. Like, I didn't track. It was very low carb. I mean, it was like, I would say maybe 30 grams or less a day was what I was already
I did
doing.
less than 10, but it was net grams. So I remember there was a lot of, like, in just the ketogenic diet community, there was a lot of discussion about whether you should be doing total grams versus net grams. And net grams was like you can subtract any fiber or sugar alcohols.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of an excuse to eat more carbs, I thought.
Yeah.
I always followed Dr. Berry's approach, and he would always say total, not net, because net can really get you in trouble. And if you're doing total, then you actually know what you're actually getting, and it's usually whole foods and things like that.
I didn't even know about Dr.
Trying to do all the keto treats and keto, just fun things that get you into trouble that aren't really keto, but say keto on the label.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't know about any of these doctors back then. And I followed this woman who was from, I don't know, North Carolina or something, named Christy, and she was pretty dirty keto
I know Christy.
You know Christy?
I love Christy, but I didn't follow it the same way she did, and she works a lot of stuff into that keto diet.
She does.
And she's actually type 1 diabetic now.
Oh no.
I don't know if it's the same Christy I'm talking about.
She wrote cookbooks. Is that
okay? Wait. I need to not speak. Ooh, I need to not speak because it may be a different Christy.
Yeah, possibly. I know that when I was following her, she was doing a lot of cooking from her kitchen.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about. That's a different Christy. My bad.
Yeah, and she did lose a lot of weight. And then after I had already started following her was when she published her first cookbook. I think she's got like 3 or 4 ketogenic cookbooks out there now.
I like her a lot too, but yeah, I can't work all that extra stuff in there.
No, I can't either. And yeah, and some of the stuff that she cooked that was considered low carb, just, I mean, I didn't know then that I needed to worry about the histamines, and so it just didn't sit well. But I did do the net carb thing, and it was bad for me. I was doing a lot of those, what are they, the mug cakes or whatever that you can do with low carb mug cakes. That was like, I would make those almost every day, and I would get the bars and stuff, and making
it's
stuff.
I feel like it's a good entry point. You know what I'm saying? Like if you are just on the worst of the worst standard American diet, Sure, that would be better for you. That's where you should start. But
Yeah.
then once you know better, you do better. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like as you go, you can work your way up to the ultimate boss, which is carnivore.
Right. And I
Yep.
never got over my sugar addiction. I mean, I was
Yeah.
doing making all the sweet fat bombs, and yeah, it just continued to feed my sugar addiction when I did that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out where I was. Let's see here. Do y'all know where I was at?
Let's see. I think you were on. Let's see. You finished up on. It was paragraph 1, 2, 3, sentence. So you finished sentence 1. So I think
Okay.
it total. Yeah,
I'll
total.
just read the third paragraph.
Okay.
While most research studies of carbohydrate restricted diets have used total carbohydrate in grams in their teaching, TCR is commonly taught doing net carbohydrates in grams as the method of counting carbohydrates. Total carbohydrate refers to all nutrients on a nutrition facts label that are labeled as carbohydrate, including net or glycemic carbohydrate, as well as fiber and non-sugar sweeteners. Net glycemic carbohydrate is calculated by subtracting carbohydrates from a total carbohydrate that are in the form of fiber and non-sugar sweeteners. The rationale for subtracting out or not counting the fiber and non-sugar sweetener carbohydrates is that they have very little effect on the blood glucose concentrations compared to sugars and starches, net or glycemic carbohydrate. Counting net glycemic rather than total carbohydrate allows an individual to consume more carbohydrates. 20 grams of net carbohydrate may represent 40 grams of total carbohydrate because the fiber and non-sugar sweeteners have been subtracted. However, many sugar alcohols have 1 or 2 calories per gram compared with sugars, which have 4 calories per gram. There have been no studies comparing total carbohydrate to net carbohydrate for the treatment of obesity and diabetes. Total carbohydrate has been used in most research studies. A popular instructional TCR website uses net carbohydrate, advising only to subtract the fiber grams from the total carbohydrate in the net carbohydrate calculation. This website categorizes TCR or LCHF into strict LCHF, less than 20 grams net or glycemic carbohydrate daily, moderate LCHF, 20 to 50 net or glycemic carbohydrate daily, and liberal LCHF, 50 to 100 net or glycemic carbohydrate daily. These categories are similar in the categorization of TCR diets used in clinical research studies, but the use of net glycemic carbohydrate is different.
Okay. So, all right. So we got some definitions. So that's helpful.
Yeah. And they have a table, but I think this table is basically exactly what I read as far as how they're defining. So we can probably skip over that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Do we want to stop here or do we want to keep reading?
What time is it?
We've
been going for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, we can stop or we can go for 15 more minutes. Evan gets out of class in 15 minutes.
Okay, let me see. I can read this next section and then we can stop on page 74 if you want to do that. Okay. 2.2.1.2 Nutritional Sufficiency in Therapeutic Carbohydrate Restriction. In formulating any nutritional approach, the first consideration is to ensure the provision of all of the known substances that the human body needs but cannot make on its own, known as essential nutrients. In other words, it is essential that these substances are in the nutritional intake because they are necessary for normal human physiology, and the body is unable to make them on its own. And that's demonstrated in table 2.1.
And I don't have any slides of these from chapter 2 yet. So I'll make slides before the next one.
Okay. So essential nutrients include amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, and an energy source. It is noteworthy that carbohydrates, sugars, and starches are not on the list of essential nutrients. So there we go.
Yeah.
They are not essential. In a generally healthy population, the human body is capable of endogenous carbohydrate synthesis and does not exhibit signs of deficiency in the absence of dietary carbohydrates. Nutritional ketosis may even be considered an alternate normal state due to its occurrence in infants who have a very low carbohydrate intake. However, in certain genetic defects, such as glycogen storage disease type 1, a lack of dietary carbohydrates results in abnormalities that can be corrected with carbohydrate supplementation. Dietary carbohydrates can thus be classified as conditionally essential nutrients because they are nutrients that are not required in the diet for the general population, but are required for specific subpopulations.
I wonder how you know if you have that.
You would know as a tiny baby because you would be failure to thrive, and you would have to see a geneticist.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a friend of mine's grandchild had that, or it could be something simple. I'm not sure, but it's what this is it was something like they couldn't have proteins, or they had to. It was some kind of an issue with proteins.
Are we talking about glycogen storage diseases?
Well, I don't know. I may be associating a different. I just know that her grandson had to protein was severely limited for him.
Okay. I don't know about the protein, but just working through it in my mind. Okay, glycogen. If you can't store glycogen, I would think that your sugar would drop really quickly and easily, especially if you were a baby and you were just drinking breast milk and you were kind of in ketosis anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe once you got out of that ketosis, I don't know at what point. What do you all think?
Yeah, I don't know enough about it.
I don't either.
Yeah, but I mean,
it may not even be the same thing. I just kind of related it to that, to what she had told me, because I didn't even know it's a rare thing, whatever he's got.
Yeah, it seems like if there's an issue with glycogen storage, that that the failure to thrive thing makes sense, because and I would think that the infant would be hungry all the time because they're not really able to draw on any. They have no reserves, right? They don't have any glycogen reserves. And for energy,
so let's see,
they probably get low and really low energy, probably not feeling like they're well nourished.
So glycogen storage diseases are a group of rare inherited conditions that can cause frequent low blood sugar, muscle weakness, and liver damage. There are several different types based on which enzyme is missing, and each one affects you differently. Most types are manageable with treatment. It means your body can't use or store glycogen properly. And let's see here. Your body creates glycogen from glucose through a process called glyconeogenesis. When your body needs extra fuel, it breaks down glycogen for use through a process called glycogenolysis. Several enzymes are responsible. Glycogen storage diseases happen when you don't have one of those enzymes. So
this says
low blood sugar.
Storage is also use of the glucose.
Yeah.
The problem. Interesting. Okay. All right. So basically, if you're born with it, you would know.
You would know really early in life.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I think what I read too was that you had to have, your parents, both parents have to have an abnormal gene mutation that affects a specific way that glycogen is stored or used for you to get this. So it's probably extremely rare from what it sounds like. And this is per John Hopkins, just so you guys know where I'm getting it from. And then I got the other from Cleveland Clinic. So
both reputable, good sources. So okay. All right.
So concerns about nutritional inadequacy of TCR diets often stem from nutrition inadequacies observed in therapeutic ketogenic diets used for the treatment of childhood epilepsy. However, there are several key differences between TCR diets used for other applications and the ketogenic diet used for epilepsy. The ketogenic diet used for epilepsy has a ketogenic level of carbohydrate restriction, protein. Wait a minute, what? Let me go back to that again. The ketogenic diet used for epilepsy has a ketogenic level, of carbohydrate restriction. Protein intake is limited, thus limiting nutrient-dense animal foods, which usually supply the majority of micronutrients in carbohydrate-restricted diets. And fat intake is usually very high to meet the energy requirements. The ratio of macronutrients is controlled at every meal. See Chapter 2.2, Meeting Micronutrient Requirements. When using TCR with or without ketosis for a non-epilepsy application, like obesity and diabetes, it is not critical to be in nutritional ketosis at all times. The carbohydrate intake does not have to be ketogenic, and animal food intake can be more plentiful, allowing for more liberal intake of a variety of nutrient-dense foods to meet nutrient requirements. Indeed, research shows that carbohydrate-restricted diets can meet micro and essential nutrient requirements for adults and adolescents. In fact, due to superior bioavailability of many nutrients in TCR diets, due to heavy reliance on minimally processed animal-based foods, TCR nutrition may even exceed requirements. It's also important. Yeah. It's also important to remember that nutritional guidelines reflect expert opinion and do not account for the possibility of different vitamin and mineral needs under varying caloric and metabolic conditions, calling the relevance of concerns about TCR meeting conventional dietary guidelines into question. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, and we always hear the thing about you're not going to get the vitamins that you need, especially vitamin C. That's a big one.
Right.
They always talk about. So there have been no reports of micronutrient deficiencies in clinical trials of TCR diets with or without nutritional ketosis, regardless of whether they follow expert recommendations. Although a low carbohydrate, high fat diet is nutritious, many experts advise taking a multivitamin to ensure adequate vitamin and mineral intake.
Interesting. I know all the doctors that I hear in the carnivore community, I haven't heard them say, have you guys heard of them say to take a multivitamin?
No. But I mean, I've heard Dr. Berry say, if you're worried about it and it makes you feel better to take a multivitamin, go ahead, he'll say that kind of thing. And I can see where it would ease some people's mind, and that's worth a lot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as like vitamins in general, I mean, even just on the standard American diet, well, number one, you're not necessarily meeting those requirements either because you're eating garbage food, 90% of the time.
Right.
But I mean, even then, the research on taking a multivitamin daily is not good. It's not reassuring. So
no. But there are people who have like methylation mutations and methylation, and they may not even know it. And
I do.
Yeah. So, there may be there's people out there who do need to supplement, but it'd be really good to get tested and know what specifically you can't,
Well,
you do on your own.
And even though you have that gene, the methyl, so it's called the MTHFR gene mutation.
You know what I'm thinking.
Everybody's thinking that. Literally, the scientist who named that mutation was thinking that. But yeah, so I have a version of that, okay? And all of my levels of like folate and everything are completely normal. So, I think the main thing is you can't change the folic acid. Like if you were to take folic acid, it'd be useless to you because your body can't methylate it. But I'm thinking if I'm getting my folate from like eggs and stuff like that, in my mind, I'm thinking maybe that's why I'm not low, because I'm getting a proper form of it, but that's just a guess. I really just discovered this recently, and I just let these two ladies know this week actually that I have that. And the main reason why I did was because I was kind of concerned about maybe if Lynn might have it because she has low folate, but I do not have low folate. So, I mean, I don't know. Is that my theory blown out of the water? Who knows?
Although I did have my folate levels checked previously and they weren't low.
Oh.
So, yeah. So hard to say.
But yeah, definitely the folic acid. That's the man-made.
Wait a minute. No, that's not true. Hang on. Sorry, I'm mixing up two of my labs. No, I have never had the folate levels checked before. It was the ferritin levels that I had checked before.
Oh, I thought you said your folate was low.
It is low. It is low. I was thinking I had the folate checked before.
Oh, gotcha.
I was confusing that with ferritin. I did have a previous ferritin test, but the folate, no. So I've only had one folate test my whole life. So I don't know. I do have the variation.
Well, maybe you do, and maybe it was lower before. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah.
But I would be interested to see if you could plug. So, guys, how I did this is I took my 23andMe medical. Well, it's not just a medical data. It's my whole genetic sequence, basically. And I plugged that data. You can get the raw data from 23andMe, and you can plug it into a site called Genetic Genie. Genetic Genie is free to use, and well, it was when I used it anyway. And so you can plug it in there, and you can. Okay, hold on. My son's trying to get in. Let me see here. I gotta let him in. But anyway, it's free to use. Let me let him in. Sorry, guys.
And I gotta text my husband and let him know
I didn't plan for this very well, did I? But anyway, I'm still on live, Evan. But so Genetic Genie is free to use, and you plug your raw data in there, and then it will spit out this report that is amazing. Okay. If you have any genetic variances, any genes that are special for, that basically show that you might be more susceptible to certain medical conditions, it will spit that out. And it's definitely way more in depth than 23andMe's data was. So it picked up on my mannose binding lectin deficiency, and that matched up with labs that I've had in an immunologist, and also picked up on my MTHFR variation. So
interesting. Well, I'm gonna have to try it. I don't know. Like I did have genetic testing done through Ancestry quite a few years ago, and I don't.
The same.
Hopefully I'll have to look at it and see, and maybe see what I can find out. So
yeah, because it's just that raw data. As long as you can download your raw data, your raw, it's like your genetic, what do they call it? Like your genetic sequencing, basically.
Yeah.
So as long as you can put Mike's comment in.
Mike.
Yes, Mike. Yes.
That's great.
As long as you can plug in as long as you can get a copy of your raw data, then you should be able to plug it in.
Okay. All right. So, well, I'm going to have to take a look at that and see what I can find out. But interesting. All right. Very good. Well, we are going to stop here, and we'll be picking up next week. And I'm just excited. We're finally on chapter 2. We've got 10 chapters in this book, and it took us a long time.
I'm so excited. We're on chapter 2.
Yeah. Chapter 2 is about
we're
the
this
same
far
length.
along.
That's right. Chapter 2 is about the same length as chapter 1, so we'll be here for a few more months, huh?
Yep.
We'll see you in 6 months for chapter 5.
That's right.
Right.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. Thanks for everyone who showed up. And
thanks, guys.
Come see us on
Thanks,
our channels.
everybody.
We'll talk to you next time.
See you next week.